What's going on, guys? Zedd here, bringing you another Marvel Midnight Suns video. We are so close to release, less than 4 weeks, cannot wait for sure. And just coming off the back of the Ghost Rider gameplay reveal, or showcase rather, I was thinking about this video idea for a long time now, and it was one that I was waiting to definitively get an understanding of what Ghost Rider did. Now, of course, in the last dev stream that we saw, which I broke down in my last video, we did get to see more of what Ghost Rider was capable of, but I wanted to sort of see it and get more of a grasp on it myself before I made this video, which in today's video I'm going to be giving you my thoughts. Again, this is pre-release, like my tier list video, like my team comps video. I'm going to upgrade all these things after my first playthrough. We're going to be discussing who to befriend and who to ignore, as you see on your screen. In other words, I'm going to give you my rating 1 through 5 on all of the roster that's confirmed, and kind of explain, is it worth going into, or rather, is it worth investing into friendship levels with them? Is their passive worth it? Is their Midnight Suns heroic legendary card worth it? All that sort of jazz. And we're going to talk about it. So this isn't going to be a tier list. You'll notice that my tier list placements of these characters do not correspond with the ratings I give them on this. This is strictly discussing their passives and their Midnight Suns cards, or M Suns card as I've dubbed it in this document, and my thoughts on that. So because what you guys need to remember is getting friendship really high on multiple characters is quite taxing. There's only a certain amount of havens in the game, which is like the burst friendship events, and they're one-time use per playthrough. And to get any more than about 4 characters max friendship is apparently a lot of work. That's according to the devs. So you kind of want to make it count, right? And if you take my ratings at least into consideration, it might help you save a bit of time. All right, and this is something I've been thinking about for a while, like I said, and something I'll be using in my first playthrough personally. And this document, if you want to reference it, will of course be linked down below. So let's discuss sort of the breakdown, and so this is a table of contents you'll find. If you go to the document version, you'll see all this. You'll notice that Hunter is missing. Well, that's because there's no friendship thing for the Hunter. The Hunter is her own thing, like the bands around her neck and stuff. Like that's gonna be its own content, its own video, but I'll have to play through to get to that. So Hunter is excluded from this list. Now the breakdown is as follows. You have level 1 is either useless passive or useless card, or near useless. You have level 2, which is a solid passive at level 1, which again you get at friendship level 1, so it's very, very minimal investment. Or it's a solid M-Suns card, so in this situation maybe their passive is useless, but their M-Suns card is so strong that it might be worth maxing. Maybe. Level 3 is a strong or useful or good level 2 passive, so again this is a bit more investment than just friendship level 1, but less than level 10, or a solid M-Suns card. Level 4 is both a good passive and M-Suns card. You'll notice level 3 is or, and level 4 is and. And then level 5 is a perfectly synergetic design and strong M-Suns card. Now that doesn't necessarily mean their passive will be the best in the game. That just means that their passive works really well with their kit. And these ratings will hopefully make sense as we kind of go down the list. I'm not going to spend too long discussing it because I'm only going to talk about the things that are pertinent to the passive or the Midnight Suns card, but this is primarily discussing the passives, and then is the M-Suns card good or not, and you can sort of use that to gauge how you want to push the friendship. Alright, so let's get started with Blade, and hopefully it'll make a bit more sense. So, oh, and I've also listed here, so I have the M-Suns card, and then I have, if there are any sort of synergetic or useful cards that sort of work in tandem with specifically the passives, I have added those as well. Okay, so for Blade, of course, we're going alphabetically. Blade, we have Glaive as his M-Suns card. It does damage and bleeds in an AoE. It has exhaust. So his passive reads Cold-Blooded at level 1, 10% chance to apply a stack of bleed when dealing damage. Level 2 is 25% chance when dealing damage. So if you think about what Blade wants to do, you look at cards like Reaper and the Hunger and his chain attacks, right? That's multiple instances of damage. You look at his glaive, which is a big AoE of damage, and the fact that bleeds stack, it means that there are so many ways for Blade to proc bleed, and or rather to proc this passive, that even though the percentage is only 10 than 25, you are attacking so many times that it's just sort of bound to happen, especially with his chain attacks. So all in all, I think his M-Suns card is good. It's not the best one in the game, but it's good. And it's this really, really strong finisher on high health targets, or if you have a ton of bleed just stacked up, you can just use Reaper. So you can go, in the same turn, you could go, chain attack, glaive, Reaper, boom, 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 kill, 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 or some other support card, glaive, Reaper, and just frag out, right? So for me, Blade, based on my ratings, gets a 5 out of 5 because his card, his passive, they're good, they're useful, they're synergetic. He has ways of playing around it. You can build him around it. And so I think maxing friendship with Blade is, if you're interested in using the character, is advised. I would say going for level 2 passive for sure. I think level 1 passive, pretty useless. 10% chances, it's only 10%, right? Whereas 25% chance, that's pretty significant. That's 1 in 4. So again, level 5, perfectly synergetic and good M-Suns card. That's pretty much what I think of Blade. Okay, moving on. Like I said, we're not going to spend too long here. Captain America. So his M-Suns card is Shield Charge. It is a 6 cost, consume all block to deal damage in a line, exhaust. And his passive is All Day. And at level 1, it's begin combat with 16 block, and at level 2, he gains block per turn. We don't actually know what that coefficient is at the moment. However, you can imagine that as a tank, as a character with a lot of block stuff and taunts, that's really useful, right? So for me, he scores a 3 out of 5 rating because the level 2 passive is just such a strong tanking passive. I feel like you need that at the higher difficulties, or maybe not need it, but it will be so useful because if you think about it this way, if this maybe doesn't, this might help put it in perspective. At level 2, Captain America is getting perpetual damage mitigation constantly, right? Every single turn, regardless of what you do, he's just gaining, more mitigation. So I think his level 2 passive is incredible. But I think his Midnight Suns card is honestly pretty rough. Yay, it does a good amount of damage if you have a lot of block, but the thing is that you need to remember, he's not going to have a metric ton of block all that often, primarily, or especially on the higher difficulties, simply because he's taking so much damage, right? That I just don't think a 6 heroism cost, which is so expensive, right? 6 heroism cost and exhaust, and it's only in a line as opposed to an AoE, and it consumes your block as the tank. I can't. I'm not sold. I'm not sold on this Midnight Suns card whatsoever. I think it's pretty rough, but his passive is so good that it really makes it worth it. So push for level 2 passive, in my opinion, 3 out of 5. And again, the last time, 3 out of 5 is a useful level 2 passive or solid M-Suns card, and in his case, it's a useful level 2 passive. Alright. Captain Marvel. So Captain Marvel's ult is a Supernova, 2 cost, damage enemies in an area. Woo. Didn't feel a thing level 1. On KO, that's the key. On KO, 10% chance to gain 1 counter, limit 1 per turn. And level 2, same thing, but 20%. So the thing with Captain Marvel's passive that you need to keep in mind is not only is it 10 or 20% chance, but it's on KO, which means it's not going to happen. Like, once you've kind of killed the trash mobs, it's not really going to happen. So it's such an inactive passive on top of having such a low coefficient. Yes, counter is good, but counter, like, the fact that it's 10 and 20%, what you have to understand is you can't use this passive and think, oh, I'm going to counter next turn, or I'm going to counter the enemy's turn. It's like, well, no. You would be assuming that you wouldn't get it only to get it, which might not even be all that useful. So it's unreliable, it's inactive, and by inactive I mean it's only on KO. And quite frankly, I think her M-Sun's card is kind of weak. Yes, it's 2 heroism cost, but all it is just AoE damage. And the thing is, it's only AoE damage at sort of like, she needs binary. Like without, which I guess I could have put as the third card, but binary is its own passive in Marvel or Captain Marvel's design, so I'm trying not to discuss that here because that's its own thing. With binary, sure, Supernova is decent, but again, like you have to get binary, have Supernova in your hand. Like yeah, I just don't think it's that great. But it's good with binary for sure. That's worth mentioning. Let me just add that here. Binary. But I still don't think that it's all that good in general. Yeah, 1 out of 5 for me. I think her passive's awful. The other thing you have to consider too is you have to get them to max friendship to even get the Midnight Suns card, and I think her passive sucks. So yeah, for me that's a no-go for Captain Marvel. Doctor Strange. So Doctor Strange, I mean, this should be no surprise, right? Given how good I think the character is. 4 out of 5. So his card is 7 Sons of Cinnabus, 3 cost, damage areas, enemies in an area, exhaust. So, but Zedd, you just said Captain Marvel's was bad because it was just damaging AoE. Yes. So his card, while not great, does benefit from enhanced, and if we're discussing synergies of design, it's very synergetic with his passive. So his passive being greater good, 50% chance to generate 1 heroism per turn. At level 2, it's 2 heroism. That is insane. That is borderline OP, and it is probably the best passive in the game. Not only because of its high coefficient, but with how integral heroism is to the game. And this also opens up cards that use X amount of heroism, or, heroism cards that are a little more expensive. And for Doctor Strange himself, as you can see, I've listed 2 other enhanced cards. Enhanced, in case you don't know, benefits from certain breakpoints of heroism. So as you can see there on the M-Suns card, it's 5, 7, and 9. So at 9 heroism, it does more and more and more damage, right? So I don't think the M-Suns card is that strong. I don't think you'd want to push him to max friendship level necessarily. However, his passive is so broken that even though, based on my ratings, he'd be a 3 out of 5, I gave him an extra point for his passive. I think his passive is so broken that if you even consider running Doctor Strange, you gotta get him to the passive level 2. Like, okay, even then, let me take that back. Even then, at level 1, that's insane, right? A free 1 heroism, pretty much. That's insane. So I think his passive is ridiculous. Like, of the support characters, it's best in slot. Captain America is best in slot for tank. DPS we'll get to. But yeah, so definitely push for level 2 passive. M-Sun's card if you want it, though I don't think it's particularly necessary for him. 4 out of 5. Ghost Rider. So Ghost Rider, Ghost Rider's a weird one. So Penance Stare consumes half of Ghost Rider's health to deal damage, 4 per health consumed. The problem with this card, and its exhaust. The problem with this card is it's single target. Okay, which is not great. Now, can it be a massive nuke on bosses? Yes, and that's how I think it's probably best used. However, the fact it's consuming 50% of your health, the damage can either be really high and then you're at risk, or really low and you're at risk. Like, there's always a risk. So you want to have healing, and in order to get healing, you have to use your Drain Soul passive or get support from team. Like, this M-Suns card just isn't particularly useful unless It's like a finisher on a boss, and you built your whole team around this character, which I think is the only way Ghost Rider is going to be viable, to be completely frank with you, but that's a conversation we've had in another video. So his passive Soul Collector, filling the souls meter, excuse me, increases Ghost Rider's max HP by 15%. Level 2 is the same thing, however, it only takes 2 souls to fill rather than 3. And to fill it, he has to get the KOs. So not only is he just eating his health all the time, but he has to be the one to physically get the kills. Yes, you can stack that up on trash mobs, so it's not particularly difficult. However, you have to go out of your way to make sure that he's the one doing the killing. So it makes characters like, or makes cards rather, like chain abilities a bit less good, AoE is a bit less good. And then, realistically, 3 souls versus 2 souls, that's not really a deal breaker. Especially when you consider that his max HP only goes up a couple times per mission. Plus, that implies you have to heal it all back up, which means you have to use the Dragon Soul card. So it's all just like, it works, but it's risky. It's hard to make work. It requires a lot of setup, and I just don't think the payoff is there for this character. And so for me, I put him at 2 out of 5, because it's not that his passive is good or his card is good, or his passive is bad or his card is bad. It's that I think he's just so much work, and he's really only good if the comp is built around him, that just makes it hard. Like, it would be hard for me to justify leveling this dude's friendship unless I'm like, I am building a Ghost Rider comp no matter what. That's just hard, right? So that's why I personally gave him 2 out of 5. However, if we omit the limitations via team comp and we only look at Ghost Rider as a character, it's probably more like 3 or 4 out of 5. But this is one of the instances where I could not ignore the fact that you should probably be building around him. So, yeah, 2 out of 5 for me for Ghost Rider. Iron Man. So we said Doctor Strange had the best support passive. We said that Captain America had the best tank passive. And I would say Iron Man probably has the best DPS passive. Which is, I'll handle this. If Iron Man plays 3 cards, or rather if you play 3 Iron Man cards in the same turn, you get 1 redraw. This can only happen once per turn. Meaning that theoretically, if you played a bunch of quicks or you hit a bunch of marks and you were somehow able to play 6 or at level 2, 4 cards, you couldn't just keep stacking redraws. Now at level 2, it's only 2 cards. The thing is, I actually think that the level 1 passive is pretty bad. Like, genuinely, I think it's pretty bad. But the level 2 passive is really good. Now, why is that? Well, because when you redraw Iron Man cards, they don't go back in the deck. When you redraw Iron Man cards, they just gain the effects. So, Hellfire Beam, if you read that, it says damage each enemy in a line, redraw to add 10 damage. When you use a redraw, the card stays in your hand and is 10 damage, 10 damage, 10 damage. And it maintains that 10 damage so long as you keep using it, or redrawing. So, it's really, really effective at being just a big, massive nuke. You'll notice it does not have exhaust, which is a huge factor when it comes to these cards. And it's only a 3 heroism cost. So if you get level 2 passive, you play 2 Iron Man cards, you gain 1 redraw, so that gives you 3 redraws in a turn, assuming there was none other gained. That's already 30 damage on top of Hellfire Beam. Now if you look over at the cards that I've attached, it's the marked target and leave it to me. The marked means refunds the card play, so it generates more opportunities to play Iron Man cards. And leave it to me draws the Iron Man cards, and then the redraws as well. So leave it to me is just an insane Iron Man card, period. Like, that doesn't even really need to be explained, I feel. But in general, if you have leave it to me as passive at level 2, and you have those 2 things going for you, oh man, like, you're just going to be racking up the redraws and the buffs and the benefits and all that. Now, in a way, there is an argument that oh, well, if you have to use your redraws on Iron Man cards, is that really worth it? Because then you can't redraw the more deck or the more bricky cards that you drew from your other characters. And while I think that that is a fair argument, I am also a believer in sitting on tech cards, meaning cards that you would kind of want to wait for the opportune moment if you're running Iron Man. So if Iron Man's on your comp, just use the redraws only for Iron Man pretty much exclusively. And then build your other two characters' decks in a way that any card you draw, you're like, yeah, this is decent. I'm cool with this. I'm happy with this in my hand. That's the goal, right? And if you're not running Iron Man, yeah, we don't need, like, use your redraws, throw away those one-off cards that you may not need. All good. But anyway, 5 out of 5 rating, super synergetic. Max out this dude's friendship. The Hellfire Beam is really strong because of the redraw mechanics specifically. Yeah, it all works really well. For sure, for sure. Magik. So Magik, her my rating for Magik is 2 out of 5, and the reason why mostly is because I think that her passive at level 2 is okay, and her ultimate is good when it works. But that's the key, is when it works. So my 2 out of 5 rating is everything is decent on paper, but it's not particularly useful or active all that often. And by active, much like Captain Marvel, I was saying it just doesn't come up often enough that you're like, oh, this is the play right now, or you know, oh, I'm gonna play Darkchild. Like, no. The thing with Darkchild that makes it a little awkward is it's the kind of card that you'd want to keep in your hand until you need it, and you would use it when a teammate's gonna die, or she's gonna die, or someone's gonna die. Use it as like your get out of jail free card, right? In a vacuum, Darkchild is a great card, but the thing is, it's only great at the opportune moment, and so therefore it's not active all that often. The other thing is her passive. So Relay, 10% chance to generate Limbo Portal card after enemy is knocked back through a portal. What's important to remember is Magik is the one who can knock them through portals. That's issue number 1. Issue number 2 is you don't, like, 10% is quite low, 25% is decent, and yes, while Limbo Portal cards are free, which is great, that means you have to have just so many knockbacks in her kit that you might be missing out on other things. But furthermore, just don't know if it's necessary. Like, I really don't think it is, because I feel like if you position her properly and you use her well enough, you probably won't even need, like, I don't actually think the portal gimmick is as strong as some people hope it is. I might be wrong. I've talked about this a bit more in the tier list video, but I'm not sure if the portals are going to be amazing. But anyway, different conversation. Drops, right? Death Pits. That's where she's really going to shine for sure. So to get to 2 out of 5, because I think the ultimate card is good, just niche. And I think that if you are going to build a game plan that uses lots of portals and drops, then it's good. But in a general, non-gimmicky sort of team composition, do you need her passive? Do you need her ultimate card? I don't think so. So 2 out of 5 for me. Nico. So Nico, oh boy. Nico's one of the weird ones. I mean, obviously this is Nico, right? But so her ultimate, Crack the Sky. Its exhaust, consume all heroism to damage random enemies. That's the issue, is the random enemy part. And so therefore it's unreliable. Yes, it does a lot of damage, but it is unreliable. Her passive, and another one, 33% chance of drawing a card whenever a Nico card is played while Nico is at full health. I think her level 1 passive is borderline dog shit. No, it is probably pretty bad. But her level 2 is much more useful. So the only difference is she doesn't matter what her health value is. It's 33% chance of drawing a card anyway. However, I genuinely don't think that generic draw power is that strong in Midnight Suns. What do I mean by that? I mean generic draw power as in draw any card. draw a card, draw a card, whatever you want to say, whatever you want to do. I don't think it's that good. The kind of draw power that I think is good is when a DPS character like Spider-Man or Iron Man or Blade reads draw to this character's cards. And the reason why is because they are synergetic. So Iron Man would draw cards to be redrawn, Blade would draw cards to work with bleed, right? And Spider-Man would draw cards to activate Infernal Spider combos, right? So specific draw power is pretty good. Generic draw power, not so good. Why, Zedd? Well, because if you've seen my deck building video in term that talks about the rate at which you draw cards and yada yada yada, the biggest thing to keep in mind is you always draw up to the number 6 in your hand every turn. So again, just as a refresher, if you have 6 cards in your hand and you use your 3 card plays, you have 3 in your hand. The next turn, you will draw 3, totaling 6, which means that generic draw power is like you are quite literally heart of the cards in Yu-Gi-Oh style, because what you get might not be useful, and now you just sort of drew the card you would have drawn the following turn anyway, right? So for me, generic draw power is pretty rough. Therefore, she gets a 1 out of 5. I think her passive being generic draw power is bad, and I think her card is pretty bad, so I would not want to max the friendship for her at all. Scarlet Witch, her ultimate I think is probably bottom 2 in the game. 6 cost, which is already bad enough. 6 cost, consume all health to damage each enemy near Scarlet Witch exhaust. So it's a self-destruct button, right? Like, let's just call it what it is. It's a self-destruct button. That's really bad, right? That means it can really only be used as a finisher. It's and she's a caster. She's not a tank. She's like a pseudo hybrid between damage and support, kind of like Nico in that sense. But her passive is okay. So her passive, wrong place, wrong time, 25% chance to debuff random enemy near Scarlet Witch each turn. Level 2, it's each enemy near Scarlet Witch each turn. Now here's the kicker, right? Scarlet Witch is a bit of a weird one. And the reason why I give her a 2 out of 5 rating is because I actually think her level 1 passive is quite good. I do. I think that applying a random debuff, a random debuff to a random enemy is good. But the issue with her level 2 passive is that if you're going to put her in a position where there are multiple enemies to debuff, you should, like, you've already made a mistake, right? She's already in a compromised position. She already shouldn't be there. Therefore, I think her level 1 passive is actually quite good. I think that you should get the level 1 passive. But the 2 passive and the Midnight Suns card, I think, are just really bad or overpriced, and, you know, it's just not worth it. But so I gave her a 2 out of 5 for the simple fact that I think her level 1 passive is actually quite good. So bit of a weird one there. Not much to say. The reason I put Chaos Field here is just because for the next 2 turns, allies near Scarlet Witch gain resist. So if you think about using Scarlet Witch as sort of like an off tank, right? So let's just say she's with Captain America. If you have Captain America doing his thing and you move Scarlet Witch into a position where she can debuff the same targets that are near Captain America, and then use Chaos Field to sort of buff him, I think that's a good way to use her. I think if you play her in a very risque way, I think that's a good way to do it. But I still don't know I don't think the level 2 passive is worth it at this moment. However, I will concede that I might be wrong. And if I'm right about playing her as a sort of an off tank, which is how I intend to try her, it is possible that the level 2 passive is really strong. But I'm not sold on that idea quite yet. So for now, level 1 passive, amazing. Spider-Man. So Spider-Man is a bit of a weird one. So his passive is bring the house down when Spider-Man uses an environment attack, 15% chance to refund heroism cost. At level 2, the first environment attack he uses each encounter costs 0 heroism. Key word there, first, each encounter. Meaning her, like, mission, I think. I'm pretty sure that's what encounter means. Otherwise it would read turn, right? His ultimate card, 4 cost, which is a little pricey. However, the next 3 Spider-Man cards are free, exhaust. So this is your, I talked about this in the team comp video, right? His whole thing is like load up your hand with Spider-Man cards, play Infernal Spider, and just go to town. You would use things like Spidey Sense to draw cards, and then I can't remember, but he has a card that's free cost and he gives him strengthened. You'd play that, and you'd play Infernal Spider, boom, boom, boom. So the hope is that you'd have just like a full Spider-Man hand, like that's the goal. Obviously easier said than done, but yeah. So his Midnight Suns card I think is amazing when it works, if it works. And the passive is okay, right? It kind of has the Captain Marvel issue where you don't know when it's going to happen. You can't really rely on it happening, but because it's heroism and not counter, it's like, oh, cool, I have that heroism cost back. Sick, right? It's like, it's nice when it happens, but you don't need it. So I think his level 1, I think his passives are okay. I actually just think they're a little underpowered, to be completely honest with you. And then his ultimate is quite good, but you have to build around it and you have to set it up. It's not just a, oh, I drew it, let's play it. You have to sort of work into it. So kind of like Ghost Rider, right, where it takes a bit of work to make it happen, but then kind of like Doctor Strange, where it's like, it's nice when the passive happens. So I gave him right in the middle, 3 out of 5. For me, that felt right, although I think there's an argument to maybe bump him up to 4. I think if you felt like he should be a 4, I wouldn't even argue with you. It just felt like 3 was a little more appropriate for me. And last up, Wolverine. So Wolverine, unfortunately, we're ending on a bit of a low note. Wolverine's ultimate Midnight Special, X cost, consume all heroism to damage random enemies, each time 1 per heroism, and damage increases by 10 per attack. So the problem with this card is like, yeah, it's mega damage, yeah, it's like a room clear, yeah, it's really strong. It's strong in a vacuum. But number 1, do you really want to use all your heroism on Wolverine? I don't know. And number 2, it's exhaust, and you have to already be holding all this heroism to even make use out of it. I will say this though, if you're running like, I don't know, let's say you want it to be weird and do like Nico, Doctor Strange, and Wolverine, I think this is a great card because there's just so much heroism going around, and all 3 of those characters, all the Midnight Suns cards use exhaust, I think, and all of them want high heroism. So you could be like, stack your heroism, play 1, stack your heroism, play 1, stack your heroism, play 1. I think that could be actually quite strong. But that's a niche scenario. So is passive healing factor. When Wolverine card is redrawn, recover health, level 2, 44 health. The reason why I've written it like that is we don't actually know what the level 1 coefficient is. I'm gonna ballpark it's probably 22 or 30. 30 just feels right to me, but because rapid healing card, if you read that, it says restore 88 health. So 22, 44, 88. I'm gonna guess it's probably 22. So 2 out of 5, decent passive. Unless you're using Iron Man, then it's garbage, and that's simply because, quite frankly, in an Iron Man comp, there's only room for 1 character to use redraws, and that's Iron Man, so you would have a completely dead passive. Plus, Iron Man would want to use all of the heroism, so frankly, Wolverine, you would not want to invest any friendship if you were running him with Iron Man, and even then, I don't think it's that great. Honestly, like maybe the reason why I have him at 2 out of 5 is because it is a tanking passive, right? Which is nice. But again, if you're using Iron Man, it's completely dead, right? It's completely useless. Yeah, so for those reasons, 2 out of 5. It is what it is. So just from the top, we have Blade sitting at 5 out of 5. Super synergetic. Captain America, 3 out of 5, incredible level 2 passive, subpar ultimate, and these cards I put here just to kind of show what can work with block and shield bounce. You'd want to use that with a lot of block as well. Captain Marvel, super low rating. Supernova, okay with binary, but I still don't think that it's worth maxing friendship for it. Doctor Strange, incredible broken passive. Super synergetic. However, I don't know if you want to use his card, his M-Sun's card, but really nice. Ghost Rider, level him up if you're building your team around him. Otherwise, honestly, just don't. Iron Man, super synergetic, max all the way, a lot like Blade. Magik, not really worth it unless you're building around her. Again, very Ghost Rider. Now, if you're running like Magik, Ghost Rider, and then a tank, oh yeah, max Ghost Rider, max Magik, and just watch the opponents fly across the screen. Nico, generic draw power is pretty rough, and the random targeting on her card is rough, even though it is a high damage ability, especially on a support character, but 1 out of 5 for me. Blood for Blood is here just as a health. It might be a way to upkeep her level 1 passive, but honestly you should try to get it to level 2 ASAP if you're even going to use it. Scarlet Witch, level 2 passive has some positioning concerns for me. Her ultimate I think is awful, so I don't even want to bother going for that, but her level 1 passive is incredible, therefore 2 out of 5. Spider-Man, really just strong character in general. Infernal Spider is his big burst damage wombo combo card. His passive is nice when it works, but it only works 15% of the time, and only when you use environmental attacks, so it's not really up that often. So what gives him the edge though is Infernal Spider. So if you're going to use Spider-Man, I highly suggest you just max him out rather than use him for his passive. And Wolverine, as we just sort of discussed, awful with Iron Man in terms of his passive. I think his Midnight Suns card is subpar at best. Again, if you want to be gimmicky, maybe try Nico Strange Wolverine and just max heroism, you know, consume, max consume, max consume. Although if he's not with Iron Man, pretty solid tank passive in general, and a great way to use your redraws as well. However, that is its own thing, is because he doesn't work like Iron Man. So when you redraw Wolverine card, it's just gone, right? You just can't use it. So yeah, there you go. That's sort of my friendship rankings, as I've called them. Again, this is the rating breakdown. This will be linked below, amongst other things. It will also be linked in my my anthology, which will be linked below. And if you haven't seen my other content, I highly recommend it. If you're just sort of checking out the game now, I post dev stream. I've got a lot of useful information and sort of theory crafting and theoretical conversation bits on my pieces, my videos rather. And if you like this one, or you have a different opinion, or you think I'm wrong, tell me why. Let's talk about it in the comments. I always love reading those. And if you have any video ideas for me, drop those below as well. And I will see you guys in the next one. Have a good one.